Hello, my friends. I hope you're having an outstanding day. Welcome to another episode of the Back to Me podcast, where we get to talk to amazing humans and learn things maybe we didn't know that will help us along our way to have a fabulous life or a more fabulous life. I'm not going to assume that you're not having a fabulous life. And today I am talking to Corey Lyon Folsom. Yay! And your website is Core Relationship Coaching, but your book is called Soul Statements.
Yes.
Congratulations, by the way, on birthing a book. Like, that's a big deal.
Thank you, Heather. I'm really pleased with it.
Yeah. And one of the first things I'm always super curious about, because you've got lots in your background, and maybe you can go into it a little bit, but how did you come to this, to being this core relationship coach and creating this book from all of that varied background that you have?
Sure. Well, it was a long journey, and I was the kid in, say, high school that would have been voted less likely to kiss a girl like in 20 years. I was so shy, and eventually I did enter into relationships, and I was married 3 times. I have 2 children, but life wasn't really feeling very awesome. And there were lots of poor patterns and a lot of not knowing how to really communicate my needs or speak up for what I wanted. And so that resulted in heartache and angst, and so it was like stumbling my way along. I always thought, wow, I'm such a good person. Why is life not, responding so well? And I eventually discovered that life and the world and other people respond to presence, how you show up and
Right.
how you speak up. And so I, at some point, even hired a love coach, life coach of my own, and started to really learn. I took lots of workshops and seminars on communication and intimacy, and so I educated myself. Took
Wow.
some time.
And because I know you were like wilderness guiding and no, you're a professional tracker. Is that right?
Both.
And wilderness guiding. And you were doing, did you go into the, were you in Kundalini? You were in Kundalini. No, Tantra Yoga.
Yeah, just Tantra Yoga. Mhm.
Okay. So all of that, I guess, is part of your progression as you're starting your search. So I mean, I do wilderness guiding on the water. So it's interesting, like you're searching and when you're doing tracking, right?
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
it's like you're searching for your life as you're tracking through the wilderness.
Yes. Yes.
I'm curious, so you were married 3 times. Were they all the same woman?
No. 3
Okay.
people.
Because you can see that, like that's a pattern that shows up for some people, right?
Mhm.
They end up being with the same partner, maybe not fully married, but the same partner again and again, not seeing that pattern in themselves. But if it was a different person, then you just kept progressing, right? In some ways.
That's right. That's
What
right.
was the moment that you realized that it, like you hired yourself a coach, but was there something, an event that made you realize that it was something that you needed to address or?
Yeah, well, it was a few months after a divorce, and I just wasn't happy. I felt somewhat adrift, and that's when I started learning about Tantra Yoga and working with my breath and my presence. And I actually attracted a wonderful woman who wasn't so sure that I was ready or able to step up and meet her in real presence and good solid communication and all this. And so I that's when I hired the coach, and I said, I need to study this quick.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right. Instead of going, when summer comes, instead of going to Muscle Beach and working out so you can get good and buff to find a girlfriend, you went and worked out your your almost like emotional intelligence a little bit, right?
Exactly. She actually even said to me, "I'm not sure I want a project."
Oh, good for
Okay.
her. Like, that says she was in a really good place to
Yeah,
know
yeah,
exactly what she needed. And
yeah.
for, I guess, for people who don't know, can you tell them a little bit about what Tantra yoga is? Because some people might not know.
Sure. Well, in its essence, Tantra is an attitude and practice of paying attention to the moment, meaning the micro moment. And so the more deeply you can be present and aware, the more you're being tantric. And so it's an acceptance of life on life's terms and just being present for it. And the actual practices mostly involve slowing down, looking for wonder, feeling where the energy is in your body, and just incorporating the breath to feel whole and centered and right here, revolving around your own axis.
Right. And there's, I mean, there's a lot of yoga that has that same kind of basis. And I wanted you to talk about it because I know some people will immediately go to the mainstream tantra sex road, but I knew that's not what it was. So pardon me. And I know that your book, again, congratulations again. So Soul Statements, did that come out of, did you end up with a relationship with that woman, by the way?
Yes, 18
Oh,
months.
well, good for you.
And, we're-
Congratulations for all the hard work.
and we'll always be lifelong friends.
Right? And relationships are often mirrors for us, right? So they're always mirroring back to let us know something that perhaps we need to pay attention to. And the ones that aren't working well just have a different message for us.
Mhm.
And it's nice that you can remain that as a partner or a person, like a friend, after changing relationships. That's always, I think, a statement of maturity sometimes.
Mhm.
But your book is Soul Statements. And where did that grow out of?
That came from me working with clients and helping them develop a better message on the inside in those moments of distraction or distress or forgetting. And so there's these moments of choice when we feel tension. Oh, our partner just said something or didn't say something, and we're what do we tell ourselves on the inside in that moment? And so I they were having such great success that I thought, oh, I should write a blog. And so I started writing a blog, and I thought this is more all encompassing. And so I actually hired a writing coach
Wow,
and she helped me develop it into a book. And so
that's
4.5
excellent.
years
So
later, we have a book.
a book, there it is. Hold it
Yeah.
up again for people who are watching the video.
Here
There
it
it
is.
is. Soul
Yeah.
Statements. Beautiful. And um and it started as a blog. So it was just like your observations and things that were working.
Well, I never wrote the blog. I thought this is more
Oh,
than that. So yeah. So when a person's letting that critical voice have center stage, the soul statement teaches you to say, oh yeah, that's the thought I always think. There's a
right.
better one available. And then through maybe spending time in quiet contemplation, getting in touch with your deeper values, you maybe have some soul statements already formed that you can, pull out and apply right then. So you
And
might say, my heart is a trusted guide, or I can call upon the grit inside of me. I am not my story. And so that then can allow you to have a little bit more perspective, take a pause, and have a next thought be colored by your soul statement. So your next thought is a better one than you would have otherwise had. And you can go forward with a little bit more grace and skill in your communication.
Right. So it's the shifting. And it's interesting because I've been talking with clients recently with that same kind of idea. I didn't call them soul statements. I think that's brilliant. I'll have to send her to your book. But having that, because we do have that voice that comes up, and often it's not even ours, right? It's come from somewhere, and it's just stayed with us over time, and we've just accepted it, not recognizing that you could stop whatever that cycling is and shift it into something more useful and helpful and um, kind, really, because
Mhm.
usually our self-talk is not kind to us. It's nothing we would say out loud to anyone. But do you find that for some people, the first step, they don't even recognize that that's an inner voice? Like, do you
Yeah,
find people have to make that shift?
absolutely. So I would be asking someone, what do you say to yourself on the inside in that moment? What's the thought, or what meaning are you assigning to a given circumstance? And some people actually like to tell themselves in that moment, they say, oh, hey, inner judge, court is not in session. And then just give your brain a better message. And it's not just the thought, it's the soul statement, since it's connected to a deeper value,
Right.
and that there can be an accompanying emotional charge with it. So when you say a soul statement like the real me is enough, well, have the emotion that goes with that is what's really the most powerful aspect of it.
Right. Yeah. I know that I was listening to something recently that was talking, and it's related but unrelated. It was talking about how people use um like they'll use mantras, or they'll use visioning statements like
Mhm.
I am this, or I have this, or this is coming to me. But with that, the emotion attached to it, it's not generating the energy to shift it. It's just like that teacher at the front of Charlie Brown, wah, 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 wah,
Mhm.
wah,
Mm.
who who sounds boring and nobody's really listening to. So if you're boring and no one's listening to you, nothing is going to shift or change. You have to
Right.
put that juice behind it, right?
Yes, and also if you wanna even up the power of it, so to speak, you could incorporate some physiology. So maybe when you, as you state your soul statement, you stand up a little straighter, you raise your diaphragm and put your shoulders back a little, or maybe relax your jaw, uh, or put a hand on your heart and say, "I can trust my deep knowing to guide me." Or,
Right.
or you could, y just kinda, "Yes," some sort of fist, bump, or something. Just whatever feels right and connected to that statement, appropriately. So
Right. I know sometimes before I go to record things for social media or something that I really need to be super energized for, I stand in a power position, which I discovered by watching someone else explain what it was, where you stand with your feet a little wider apart and your hands are on your hips and you're kind of looking up. You have the pose of Superman, basically. But if you stand there long enough, it's amazing. I thought it was crazy at the time, but I stood there for 5 minutes. She said I had to stand like that for 5 minutes, and the energy shifted even though I didn't believe that it was gonna work. The energy actually shifts, and then you're like, "Whew," you are Superman or Superwoman
right.
or
Or
Supergirl,
yeah, and well, that's how Wonder Woman stands too.
right? And those positions do actually shift you energetically. So imagine if you were feeling small. I don't know what a soul statement would be for that. And you're like, "I am strong and powerful." Dun, da, da, and you stand in your power position.
Yeah. Well, you're not trying to trick your brain or bring a future desired state toward you, as much as you're just touching something that's already true, that's eternal, that lives down deep at your center and just declaring that,
Right.
owning that, claiming that. So there is strength in my center. Well, that's true. And your cells know it, your bones know it. And so you might even feel them vibrate a little more or light up when they hear you declare it,
Right.
especially with some emotion. So you're
Yeah.
just, there's resourcefulness inside you. So you can say, there is resourcefulness inside of me. Or when I trust my inner voice, I have better outcomes. And, my soul knows what to do. And so those are things that are true and valid, and you're not making it up. You're just connecting deeper to the real you.
Right. Do you ever have you ever had people who just could not find that connection? Because I know I've talked to some people who have been, it's taken them quite a while because they were so far from themselves, really.
Yeah. So some people need maybe some solo practice incorporated into ideally a daily life. And that's the more you can just be silent and still, the more your soul will just kind of bubble up, little champagne bubbles of inspiration coming up. And that's a wonderful place to get to. And so wherever you feel inspired or most connected to yourself, to just do more of that. And that could just be a stroll in a beautiful location. It could be um, just sitting quietly in nature or in front of an altar, or just being really still. It can be moving, but some form of inner stillness that quiets your thoughts.
Right. It's interesting. This was quite a number of years ago. This was over 20 years ago that I had, and it was before I started coaching, that I had an acquaintance who I, because I had started meditating, I think at that time, or maybe I was just asking him the question. And he had this habit of serially dating. Every time I ran into him, he had a different girlfriend. And I asked him why he didn't just stay alone. And he said he didn't like to spend time with himself, which
Mm-hmm.
I thought was so sad. So it's interesting, like you want people. So, yes, I see incredible value in allowing yourself that time and space alone to see who you are. But for some people, a fear comes up in that, and that they don't want to see what's there. What if they don't like it?
Yeah, absolutely. Well,
And
and that's just for what you might talk with your coach next about.
right,
Because a lot of the path to success can come through being really honest with yourself, especially with your motivations, why you did a certain thing or didn't do a certain thing. And the more we can be honest, really on it, true honesty on the inside, that's what really changes your life. That's what changed my life.
right. And when you're doing your relationship coaching, are you working with couples, or do you usually work with people on their own?
Yeah, I work with couples, but it's mostly single persons. And oftentimes I would say the bulk of who calls me are single women, maybe age 35 to 70, who are single and they want to prepare themselves to meet someone special, but they don't want to repeat the same BS that they've experienced in the past. Like, oh, I don't want to do it the same way again. And so how can I prepare myself to do it differently this time?
Right. And I was having a conversation recently, I think, with my husband about how maybe on an instinctual level, like a more like brainstem level, women are attracted to that danger guy, the guy who's probably not going to be loyal or kind or loving to you, when what they want is, like, for as a lifelong partner, you want someone who is your partner, and respect and love and communication and all the amazing things that come. But some part of you instinctually gets attracted to the wrong guy again and again and again. So I guess it's finding that way to recognize, is that going to serve me in long term, or is this just a craving right now, for lack of a better word?
That's an
Right?
excellent way to put it.
Yeah. It's because you see it played out now that things are relatively back to normal at the moment, and people are gathering again in groups. And I've seen, like, you see it, and when you go out now, it's like, oh, and I'm old enough now that I can watch the patterns of movement of young women and young men, and the positioning and the puffing and the posing, and I'm like, wow, that's so interesting. So I like the age range that you have, because that means at any age you can step in and say, wait a minute, I want to be happy, right? You
Yeah.
don't have to say it's too soon. You don't have to say it's too late.
Yeah.
Um, I was in a pub actually recently, and there was a young man there having his birthday party, a young man of 75 who is engaged to be married. I thought, that's fabulous,
Very nice. Very nice.
right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Each
does
of
your
us gets to decide when enough is enough.
right? And does your book have practices in it? Is it like is it like a user's manual?
It is chock full of practices, and it's really, it's not written like a novel or a story. It really just kind of goes from practice to practice to practice. So a lot of journaling prompts. So I'll suggest journaling about a certain thing, and here's 2 or 3 questions to answer in your journaling. There's at least a couple meditations per chapter, and various practices throughout.
Amazing. And because this just popped into my head, the meditations, have you done audio versions of those for people to access?
That's an excellent thought. I hadn't thought of that.
I only ask because I tend to record my meditations as audios versus write them down, just because I never know what I'm going to say in a meditation until the divine download comes and the meditation comes out of my mouth, and I could probably never repeat it. So, but I know because people are all very different. Some people want to read them. Some people want to listen to them. Some people want to watch, like the guided meditations. And that's what makes life so fabulous. Everybody's different, right?
Indeed.
What is your best success story for a client? Do you have one?
Yeah, well, there's one that comes to mind when you say that. And there was this, I say young man, he was probably, he's probably mid-30s, late 30s. And he would experience extreme anxiety in social settings.
Oh.
And he had a life structure that put him in crowded situations very often. And most usually he'd be emotionally paralyzed. And then he'd remain distraught about how that went for just days after.
Right.
And this would happen every week. And so he called me, and I only worked with him 3 times, which is fabulous. It's a wonderful thing when we can just get right to it.
Right.
And this doesn't really matter to the story, but it may have had something to do with the fact that he grew up in northern Canada and out in the bush. And I think he was like 5 before he was even ever brought to town. So very,
Wow.
very isolated. So then when he was an adult living actually in Southern California, it was like,
there's the people everywhere.
Yeah. And so where he would go to is feeling less than. And he would repeat this story in his head of being snubbed or looked down upon or ignored. And maybe he was ignored to some extent. But he was feeling or imagining that I'm being judged negatively by other people. And so I helped him go right to that moment and pick a different message that, so it was like a predetermined statement that he would use right and pull out of his back pocket. And so in those moments of self-doubt, he would silently declare, I am enough. And these people are lucky to have me.
Right.
And that was a whole being emotional posture adjustment for him. And amazingly, where he used to feel invisible and ignored, people just started searching him out to just connect and talk and listen. And it was such a potent shift, changed his life overnight. And that's what he needed for the coaching, and we were done. And he went on to experience life differently. So that was, I guess, one of my favorite stories.
That's awesome. And well, first of all, amazing for him, because he probably was, like, I'm sure he was an awesome human being and they were lucky to have him. But something that just popped into my head when you talked about how he would stress about those events for so long. I was listening, I don't know if you know who Dr. Teresa Bullard is. She's a PhD physicist, but she teaches in the modern mystery schools. And I've been watching her programs on Gaia TV. And she talks about the 15-minute rule. She said, if someone triggers an emotional reaction in you and it lasts longer than 15 minutes, like if you keep going over and over and over and rehashing it, she says, in all likelihood, it's something from before. It has nothing to do with the actual event that happened. And I started to reflect on that. I'm like, it's true. If someone cuts me off in traffic, I'll be, you jerk, for a minute, and then I just get on with my day. But people can sometimes say something to you unknowingly that stirs up something old in you that makes you feel like that less than person. And you'll like rehash that conversation with your friends and over. And can you believe they said that? And if it stays with you, it's probably something back further. What do you think of, do you have that? Have you had that experience?
Yes, I think that's an excellent lens with which to view it, for sure.
Right. Ah, so good. Like, if we could all shift our inner story to be more truthful to ourselves, imagine how this planet would be.
Right.
Right. Oh
We could practice more readily what I call speed to empathy. Like, how quickly can I get to a place of empathy? Like a contest.
That's cool. Do you use that with your clients?
I do.
Do you keep score?
I let them figure that part out, you know.
It's not a competition.
And then sometimes a person might ask their partner, just say, is there a way we can return to empathy right now?
Right.
And it's a wonderful way to offer a bid for connection.
And diffuse any rising tempers and arguments and
Right.
the negative, where things get said that aren't really meant in the heat of the moment, and those things stay around.
Right. You can say, you're basically saying, this is where I'd really rather be with you.
Right. Yeah, that's amazing. So good. And people can find you. Your website is Core Relationship. What's your relation?
Yes.
Let's tell people. You tell them.
Corerelationship.com.
Corerelationship.com. Boom. And you're on Facebook.
Yep.
And you're on Instagram.
Yes.
Have you started TikToking yet?
No, not my style.
Yeah. And your book is All Places with Books.
All Places.
Do you have an audiobook yet?
No, but lots of people are asking me about that.
I'm a big audiobook fan because I listen to it when I'm walking. Because I have to fit a walk in. I'll fit a walk in before I fit sitting down to read.
Great. Wonderful. Good.
So if I can listen to something fabulous while I'm walking, although sometimes I just like to listen to the birds, but but before we depart, I'm always give my awesome guests the last words of wisdom. So if you had last words of wisdom for our friends, what do you think they would be?
I would say what we tell ourselves on the inside matters, and we can each learn to call up the best part of ourselves in a moment. And the next right action, it becomes more obvious when you're connected to your value and to what you value. And lastly, I would say clarity is the new sexy.
Ooh, I like it. Thank you so much, Corey. That's awesome. So great chatting with you. My friends out in podcast land, go and connect with that book. Connect with Corey, read the book, because I can guarantee you, no matter how awesome life is, including me, there's still a voice in there that is giving me a hard time. And finding a soul statement to shift that can shift everything. Thank you, Corey.
Thank you, Heather.
Take care, friends.